Welcome to Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. I am Juliet Hahn. I'm here with my co-host, Brent Sopel, and we are here to change the narrative. We want to educate, but we also want you guys to understand what it is like to be dyslexic and how things can change. So join us every week for Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. Welcome to Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. I am Juliet Hahn, and I'm here with my co-host, Brent Sopel. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So I'm excited for this one because we are going to take the positive spin and then also, and I don't want to say negative because I don't like that word, but the flip sides of education and teachers. So one of the things a couple weeks ago, you came to me and said that there was a teacher for your hockey moms and came to you and gave you an example of something that she's doing. And it really excited us. And so we kind of wanted to give the shout out to the teachers that are making a difference and are doing things and seeing the kids that don't learn like everyone else, the kids with dyslexia, you know, with ADHD, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, all the people that learn a little slightly different, those teachers that are doing the really good things. So take us through that kind of conversation you had, because I know, you know, you lit up and I was excited because then I was going back to some of the experiences I've had as well.
Yeah, you know, I'd spoken to this mom, you know, briefly a couple times. Hi, how you doing? You know, it was the new spring team, which is only April and May, so didn't really know the families, you know, too well. Before one game, I think it was Saturday. I'm like, okay, where have you been? Soccer. We've been over here, you know, and then we just started talking. And she lo and behold, she's a special ed teacher in an area where I think it's 4 high schools. Okay. So she ends up getting the kids that get kicked out of all those classes. So I don't know what as a certain special ed, you know. Right. So she handles all the kids that, you know, are kicked out of all the classes. You know, they come to her. You know, so 4 schools. I'd probably venture, you know, maybe around 5,000 students, 6,000 students in those 4, you know, total. You know, so it was interesting. Obviously, piqued by really interesting. I didn't know. I hadn't heard that before. Obviously, I thought everybody was ran basically through one special ed office, but obviously not. And we started talking. Obviously, started talking about myself. She's like, "Yeah, my husband's, you know, severely ADHD," and you know, we started getting into learning and teaching, and you know, she was telling me that, you know, obviously all those kids have gotten through a lot, you know, kicking, punching, swear, you know, you name it, to get kicked out. Right. She goes, I've never had one student ever hit me. I've never had one student spit, you know, do anything of that nature. Because I talk to him. You know, I get in arguments with teachers all the time. You know, why are you writing them up? You know, I said to her, you know, obviously being a teacher isn't easy. You know, you got 30 kids in each class, you know, depending on how many classes or whatever, but there's always something going on. There's that why that we always talk about. And I said that to her. I'm like, the why? She goes, yeah, absolutely. There is, you know, and she's like, I try and find out what that why is, you know, and that's why I'm having the success, you know, with them, where they're not rebelling at me. They're not getting mad at me. You know, I'm meeting them where they need to be met, you know, and that's why you're writing them up for being late. Like, you don't know where they came from. Mm-hmm. You don't know why they're late. Yeah. Nobody wants to be late, but if there's a pattern, you know, there's something there. And she tries to find out what that why is. And, you know, when it comes to certain exams, she's got, you know, take me down to the wood shop and, you know, tell me in your way. You know, which, you know, obviously we talked about, which is, you know, pretty amazing. Because, yeah, you know, like you said, our brains are so different. But, you know, one thing everybody talks about, you know, test phobia, or, you know, test whatever, you know, because that's, you know, that may be not how your brain works.
Right. And the thing is that I love about that is the thing that really comes to the root of it is she is seeing those kids as people and not looking at their disability. And when someone talks to you like you're on their level and it's not like it's about how you're struggling or why you're doing this, it's like, hey, let's just get into a conversation. They feel respected and heard and understood. And that's what we talk about here all the time. That's why we're doing this podcast, is because we want to kind of bridge that gap. We want to talk to those teachers that maybe are like, okay, I didn't know anything about special ed. I didn't know anything about dyslexia. I didn't know anything about this, and challenging them to like, hey, I think in one of the episodes you even said, why don't you do one of your classes? Because no, it's not easy. We're not saying that, you know, that it's not easy to be a teacher at all, but seeing the kids, hey, what is that kid doing? He's moving around. He's really fidgety. Why is he fidgety? Maybe he's ADHD and he needs to move to learn. So why don't you kind of step out of the box and think, okay, tomorrow I'm going to give him something to put in his hand, right? To fidget. We talk about this.
Yeah,
Here's
absolutely.
my rock, right? I have clips, I have rocks, and I just put them underneath and it helps me focus. I was actually just talking to one of my clients today, and she was saying that when she's doing podcasts, she's like, I'm feeling really distracted if I'm not completely focused. She's totally ADHD. And I said to her, what do you got? And she literally put these things in her hands, and she's like, it's so silly, but it's so simple. And it is, because literally it focuses your brain. So having those teachers be like, let me step out of the box a little bit. And the fact that she has stepped out of the box, she has a husband that has ADHD, right? So she's kind of knows this. Okay, this is how I was able to reach him. I mean, one of the things with ADHD that teachers don't realize, and there's so much stuff all over the internet about it, but when you talk to someone like this and just keep going, they're not processing all the time. You need to put your hand on their shoulder. You need to pause, and less is more. The more information you're spewing at them, the more their brain is shutting down. And that's where then you're going to have a kid either get frustrated and act out, or completely shut down.
Correct. And that's the biggest thing, is that you almost got to get nose to nose with ADHD. You know, you can't yell across the room or across a soccer field or, you know, across a basketball court or a classroom. They don't hear you.
Right. There's
almost like a wall that's in between you two. So you as a teacher are, you know, yelling at so-and-so across the room to do X, Y, and Z. Oh, he's being disrespectful. She's being not listening. No, she's not. No, he's not. You have to go over there. Their brain doesn't work. They don't catch it. So they're not being disrespectful. They have no idea what you said. Basically, in their terms, you didn't say anything. And
they haven't processed it, right?
No idea. So it's basically no words came out of your mouth almost, you know? So it's being, you know, I say it all the time, being misunderstood is the hardest thing in the world. And try being, you know, a kid in grade 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever that is. And you're on that little island by yourself, and it isn't easy being a teacher, but usually there's 1 or 2 kids that stand out. You know, that kid's, you know, misbehaving, always causing trouble. You know, there is a reason there. Now, do they have IEPs, 504s, so you know what that is? You know, maybe some do, some don't. But, you know, a lot of time, 9 times out of 10, the kid doesn't want to be. You know, you can only sit there for so long. And then if you don't hear them on their level, then they just, you know, that's when things get escalated, and they get frustrated. And then that's when go send them in the hall. You know, what good was it? What good, you know, did that do? You know,
yeah. And then the other thing is, or you have the other side of it, which, you know, is a kid that doesn't want to get in trouble, right? But they're fidgeting and they are trying so hard not to fidget. So they're focused on not fidgeting. And I know this from myself, my son. But when you're focusing on not fidgeting, you're not learning. Yeah. So you're literally are not taking in what the teacher is talking about. So it's just, you're so controlled with not tapping your pencil or not moving or not, standing up or not, needing to get a brain break. But those brain breaks are like sometimes what it needs. So if a teacher's not like sees, oh, you know what, Johnny in the back, I could say, hey, Johnny, do you mind running to the main office to get me a stapler? Even if you don't need that stapler, Johnny might need to get up and just move. He comes back, he's refocused. And it's little things that if teachers, and that's what we want to challenge. We want to challenge the teachers that are not doing that and not thinking about that and listening to this podcast. But we also want the teachers that are doing this, we want you guys to reach out. We want you to reach out to us because we want to talk about your stories. So you can email us. It's all in the show notes, info@imjuliethahn.com. And we want to highlight what you're doing, what the difference you're doing. Because another teacher might listen to this and say, you know what, I didn't think about it, because you guys are not talking in the same circles. You're not hearing, you're not thinking about it because you went into teaching. And this is not a knock on anyone. My mom was a teacher, and I have many teachers in my family, but sometimes you go into teaching because it's what you're good at. And you can't imagine that a kid is not going to be good at school. Like it literally is like beyond your imagination. Like how can someone not being good in school? And so when you're going to teach, you're teaching to the kid that also is really good in school. And you're missing all of those little cues of the kid that wants to learn, because everyone wants to learn. Everyone wants to do well. No one doesn't want to do well, especially when they're young.
And that was, and she said, all right, and it reminded me of the movie Blindside. They adopted, they brought the football player in, and, the first teacher, I think he's walking down the hallway giving the answers, and she said something like, he's smart. He knows what we're talking about. We all are in our own way. And, I was talking to this mom, she's like, take me to the wood shop. She uses an example, tell me how you learn, that to a kid, after long bouts of not being heard or understood is, winning the lottery times 10 to be able to talk in your language. It's, the tests, how many people, I bombed that test. That's not where you're good at. That's not how you process it. I'm good at the, ABC test because I just write it down. I'm just ABC, but that's just, nobody wants to struggle. Nobody wants to not learn. There's always a reason why, and there's not, I don't know too many kids that are just purposely assholes. That doesn't work that way. Like they want to fit in. How do I fit in? But for myself, it was 8 hours a day, going to school, not fitting in, not being understood. It was miserable. Then it was got to the point where, I was trying to do shit to get, sent in the hallway because I didn't want to sit there and get called upon and have absolutely zero clue what was going on anyways.
Right. I mean, I know we talked about this, but like when you're sitting in class and the teacher's talking, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I remember looking around and being like, what did I miss? Why? How's everyone taking their paper out and writing? What did I miss? So then I would talk to the person next to me because I didn't want to raise my hand, right? Because I was embarrassed. Yeah. Like, what do we have to do? And then they would say it, and then the teacher would say, Juliet, stop bothering the person next to you.
Well,
now you have to come to the front.
At home, they're hour-long classes.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in my head for an hour, staring at the board or whatever with zero fucking clue of what was going on.
Right.
None.
And it feels like shit.
Oh,
it feels like shit because you're like, I know that I'm not like, I don't know what, like, yeah, it's a really almost like your body is disconnected from your mind. And it's like, I don't understand how I didn't understand what that teacher said. And I need it explained a different way, but then it's going so fast that you don't, and you just miss stuff and you miss stuff and you miss stuff.
Yeah. And that's what it was. I never asked questions. I was so far behind. I had no idea what was going on in English, the science, I was lost all day long, in school, staring at the board. What the hell is that? Hoping I wasn't going to get called upon to come up to the board or answer a question. or for reading out loud, trying to figure out where I had to go before I had to run out, get in the hallway before I had my turn. Like it was a stressful 8 hours or whatever it was sitting, in the classroom when, like you said, most kids you're not all going to be like us, but you're going to have a few that just they're going to learn a little bit differently. They're going to act a little bit differently. There's a reason why.
And here's the other thing. Thinking about, as you said, going into the hall, here's the other cue that a kid is trying to get out of something is I need to go to the nurse. I need to go to the bathroom. Right? I mean, my kid was like best friends with the nurse. And it was because he was like, I need a break. And then we realized, right? I remember I was right. I would always be like, no, I need to go here or I need to go there. But I had a teacher, I remember in first grade, that knew that. So whenever she needed someone to run an errand or do something, she would always ask me. And her name was Mrs. Hume. She was the best. She saw me and I didn't have to ask. She saw me fidget. I didn't have to ask. She would repeat it to me twice. She would come over. Hey, did you, take your paper out here? This is what we're doing. Instead of me just sitting there being lost and like, what is everyone else doing? And so there's some teachers are innate. We talked about my mom in kindergarten, right? There's kindergarten teachers that make the kids sit the whole time. They're 4, 5, and 6 years old.
Yeah.
First of all, most kids at that age need to move around. And I remember going into my mom's class when I was probably in high school or college. And I remember this so vividly. And there was kids under the table and she was up there reading and there was kids standing and they were playing with things, but they were all focused on her. Yeah. They were all listening to the book and they weren't disturbing their neighbors because we talked about that, right? If you're disturbing and distracting other people, that's a different story. But if you're not disturbing and distracting someone and you're under the table or you're over on the side playing with something, but you're still focused in and you're listening and learning, why is that a problem? I mean, we talk about, when I walk my dogs, that's when I do my best thinking because I have to move. When I'm walking is when I do my best thinking. That's when I learn my best. And I think about all those years sitting in the classroom and all that time that I missed that I probably actually wouldn't have sucked at school as much if I was just taught and I was able to do things the way my brain learned.
And you got, boys, we can't sit anyways. And, you want to go and, sit in that chair for 3 hours. I'm like, I can't sit there for 3 minutes. Never mind 3 hours. So, it's boys are idiots and, we need to move anyways. But the biggest thing is that if they're not bothering, anybody around them, what is that, what is that issue? Is it standing up back in the class? There's a million examples but if they're not bothering anybody, then I just don't understand the why it's a problem
and why it has to be a rule. Yeah. And you brought up the boy thing. This is also why so many girls are actually undiagnosed. Women are and girls are very undiagnosed with ADHD and not as much as dyslexia. And as we're reason why we're talking about ADHD is because a lot of times it goes hand in hand with dyslexia. Not always, but
30 to 40, I think it's between 30 and 40%.
Yeah. So a lot, very high. But so when you're a female, so I always presented as the male because I was super active, super hyper, couldn't sit still. So I was constantly like, why can't you be like the other girls? Why can't you be like the other girls? And it was like, they're just sitting and coloring. I don't want to sit and color. I want to go outside and run. Like, I don't want to do this. But then also a lot of times when a female has ADHD, so my older sister had the hypo, and back then it was, she had hypo. So she was the daydreamer. So she wasn't listening either. She was looking out, out the window, looking at the bird flying around, where I was trying to get out the window, to get to the bird. So that's another thing for teachers. There are daydreamers and people are daydreamers, but sometimes if you see that kid really daydreaming and really missing something, it's again, they're not doing it on purpose. They're not, flighty or what would people would say, oh, you're a ditz or this and that. No, yes, some people are a little ditzy, but sometimes it's a processing. It's an ADD, ADHD thing. And there's so many negatives to it and I think I shared with you, when I was diagnosed, I read Driven to Distraction, Dr. Howell and Dr. Ratley. And it literally, and I think I probably listened to it. I always say read, and my friends will be, and I'm like, no, that's the way I read. F off. Like, fuck you. No, that's how I read. It's same thing. But I remember being like, okay, you know what? I got this. Like, they talked about such positives because they were also dyslexic and ADHD, and they were doctors. And so I was like, I love that, because there were so many negative, right? I was kind of ashamed because I was like the boy that had the ADHD, that was the close talker, that was like, didn't know his own strength, and was like, the asshole in the class. Oh, he's ADHD. And I'm like, well, I'm ADHD. Like, I'm not an asshole. I know I'm not a close talker, but there's so many variations of it.
Right. Yeah.
That again, if you just see it and accept and help, the kid doesn't have to be the asshole, right?
The biggest thing, you're right. Female, male, it doesn't matter who it is. I call it action disease. Is we can think about it, but we can't cross that line. We can't get going, so that teacher right there to help you get going.
That's such the thing. I love that you just said that.
It doesn't take much. You don't have to go and move planes, trains, and automobiles. All right, Juliet, here, just do this.
Yeah.
That's all you need. Now you can go and do it. Now you'll start. It's not 7,000 things on the list. All right, just here, do this. All right, and it's not yelling across the room. It's walking over. Hey, I need you to do this. Go here to here, and you'll be able to do it. That's basically walking them across the line to get going. It's nothing crazy. You aren't asking to do a handstand in the corner and flip around, talk about hyper focused. If we like it, we're dialed in, hyper focused on whatever that is. And
that's the thing. That's where sometimes teachers will be like, well, you focused on this. Why can't you focus on that? Mm-hmm. And that's where there's and parents, right? Parents that don't have it or don't understand it. That's also where then they, go to the kid. Like you just finished that. You just built that whole Lego thing. I hate Legos, by the way. I don't know why I said Legos, because I never could do that. But you just built this, or you just did that. Why can't you sit and do your homework? And it's that executive functioning piece that we talk about. Executive functioning should be taught in every realm, because everyone can benefit from executive functioning. And I think we talked about this executive functioning in my mind. So when I talk like the layman's term of executive functioning, if you have a house and you have like 7 rooms, okay, and all 7 are a shit show, there's a mess in all 7. Like, I literally will stand there and not know where to start. It's still, as an adult, I'm like, I don't know where to start. And now I know, okay, just do one step at a time. But when you're a child and you have that piece of paper that has the 13 math questions on it and you're struggling, and you can't actually do it. If you put the one problem on, the kid can do it. So breaking it down and doing these little things. And that's what we're talking to teachers that maybe are not thinking about these things, right? They're not thinking about it because, and not their own fault. They're not educated, right? The education system, colleges maybe are not educating that. And that's why we're doing this podcast, because we want you to think. We want you to step out of the box. We want you to be that teacher that Johnny's like, I will never forget Mrs. Smith, because she saw me and understood me, and she made me feel heard, and you changed that kid's whole trajectory of his life.
100%. It could be I think you said your grade 1 teacher, you still remember, help change the trajectory of your life. So it could be a grade 2, it could be, freshman, it doesn't matter. You never know when that impact will be. But yeah, it's, I call it executive functioning a blender. Yeah. It's just spinning 100 miles an hour. Okay. How do we press stop and grab one thing? And I had a friend of mine, his wife, she always did a list. There's a list of 15 things. I'm like, that's not realistic. Nobody can do that. All right. So your list can't be any more than 3 things.
Yep.
If you complete those 3 things, all right, maybe you can find another one. But, you're going to stare at that list going, oh my God, just like, 13 math questions. Oh my God, what do I do? I have no idea. I don't even know where to go. I'm just,
it's
spinning,
the overwhelm.
You're lost. It's, the turn cycle in when you're walking in the door, you just keep spinning. And we don't want to. It's not exactly what we want to. So to be able to go over there and help get started, you don't know what the relief of that is. It's like, oh, thank you. Oh my God. Because a lot of times we're so lost because we're in that blender spinning that you stop that blender. Like you said, the trajectory of that kid's life, you might change forever by just learning that and doing those simple little things.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's the thing, which is so important. And I love that blender because I love that, visual, being dyslexic, the visual is how we kind of see things. But even as adults, I mean, I think we, and as I said, like when the house is messy, like even, I'm going to be 50 this year. And my executive functioning sometimes gets the best of me. And it is like, I have to pause and be like, okay, just chill out. But if I have, I have 3 kids, 2 dogs, a husband, and when life, all of a sudden, everyone's busy and I have to be the one that's kind of controlling it or like being on the schedule, I'm spinning and everyone knows because I get very like, the fun side of me kind of goes to shit. Basically, I get like, wait a second. Okay. I need to do this. And it's because I keep replaying it in my mind, replaying it in my mind. And so a lot of times what I tell my clients to do, if you have that time, especially like June at the end of the year, I'm in New York. So like we're still in school. So whatever that last month of school is, if you're a parent and you have ADHD, dyslexia, like it almost can sometimes take your legs out because you're like, how can I keep everything up? Especially if you're also working. So what I always say is, and I don't always do it, but I've gotten better where like once a year I do this when the overwhelm happens, is I just brain dump. Everything that's in my brain, I just write down. And maybe I'll go back and check it off if it's done. But a lot of times I don't because I'm not really a list person. They say that sometimes lists do help people. That's not the way I like to kind of run things. I do have a calendar and I will put things in there, but I will brain dump. And then I just feel like, okay, I just feel better because I'm not replaying it in my brain all the time. I don't want to miss this. I don't want to forget that. I have this sports event. I have this. I have to go to school here to drop, all those things you're going to mess up, but you're also just going to be running, as you said, like in the blender. So if there's a way to stop that. And so if there's, a way to like help a child as their teacher, or if you're a parent listening to this, when you see that overwhelm, just say, and if writing's hard for them, sometimes I will voice text it to myself, right? I'll just do it on the voice recorder, like just everything that's on my mind. I just get it off. And sometimes that helps, like just get you reset, it like resets you. So you could do that with a kid and help them at an early age. Cause I didn't have those tools at an early age. I've kind of learned them as I've gotten older.
And especially, kids, let's just say, middle to high school kids, you're talking about finals.
Fucking finals.
Their brain, their brains are, in that blender. All right, as parents, as a teacher, okay, how do I help them study? How do I get them going? Yeah, you may not be a list person, and there's no right or wrong. It's figuring out what works for you, what works for your child. But they could be sitting in their room trying to study, accomplishing nothing because they're in that blender. Okay, how do I stop that blender?
And that's where then the procrastination comes in.
Correct. Yep.
I was the queen of procrastination. I can't even say it. Procrastination, because once I procrastinated enough, then the adrenaline kicked in and then I had to get it done. So then I was the person doing like, the all-nighters because it was like, okay, now I procrastinated so much that I can kind of kickstart myself. Not the best.
No, but it's, what have you been doing? What I've been doing for the last 4 hours? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? No, I don't know. No, I ran 72 marathons in my head. I did this and accomplished nothing. So that's exactly where it comes from, and it's not a fun, it's not a fun feeling either.
Yeah. But also sometimes it is like, you gotta bless and release that because you can't then kick yourself being like, I can't believe I didn't. And that's what a lot of people then get in that cycle, right?
Yeah.
That they put themselves down. I didn't get it done. I'm such an idiot, blah, blah, blah. So I want to throw it to you because I know you have a lot going on in your life. When you start spinning and like you're doing, what are some tools that you do to help you kind of get yourself started or settle yourself, get yourself out of that blender?
everything for my schedule is written down.
Yeah.
I've got my day planner. I've got everything written down. If not, forget it. I'm not going to remember it. I'm not a voice texter. I'm not a put it in a calendar and phone guy. No, I hate that shit. Everything is handwritten down. So that's the biggest one, is that I need to know what's on my schedule. Everything else I leave in my head, but my main master schedule, I got to look in the morning, I look down, I write it down. Okay, what is it? Okay, what do I have? And run everything off of that. Mm-hmm. Tasks, things like that. I keep in my head, but my schedule is everything's written down.
Right. And it's really funny because there was a time where I had to have pen to paper. I mean, I have like 30 notebooks. I have some in my purse. I have notebooks everywhere, right? I actually was just laughing because I have like 4 right on my desk. So I had to write it down, pen and paper. And I do remember I was able to make that shift like when electronics happened. And I remember being like, no, I still need my notebook because that is how I am. I need to, have my schedule. I had like my day planner. I think it was when, and this is going to be funny. It's also going to date me. Do you remember the Palm Pilot?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I actually still have it in the closet. So the Palm Pilot, because you still could write, because you had that little pen. Yep. So I still could write. And I remember for whatever reason, I did do that like kind of switch in my brain, even though I would do it in the Palm Pilot, but then also have it in my notebook. Mm-hmm. And then at some point I was able to kind of do it a little bit more digitally. But I'm also the type of person, like I need to have it in my hands. Like, so if I need to like have the printed piece of paper. I can't just have it on the phone. Like if it's something important, I need to have that printed and put on a bulletin board. So like any of the kids' sports schedule, like they're like, oh, we emailed you. Yeah. Okay. I have to print it and put it somewhere so I can go in the morning, as you said, and kind of look that through. But here are all the things that like we've taught ourselves. Right. I mean, you probably taught yourself after that when we talked about it for hockey your whole life. Basically, you were told where to be for 40 years, right? Yep. You didn't have to do any of that. So then you had to teach yourself to do that. Can you take us through that a little bit? Like, I mean, what a shit show was it? And then how did you kind of be like, okay, this is what I have to do?
Well, as a professional athlete, I was told where to be, when to be, and how to be from the time I was born until I was 40.
Yeah.
What time practice was, what time the playing was, what time the game was, I was told where to be my whole life. So when that ended, I was lost. I'm like, all right, where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to eat? That was my whole life. So, it took a long time to figure it out of what I need to do. And again, technology and myself, we're not friends. We divorced a long time ago. So for me, writing it is down. Like you said, email me. Well, I don't give a shit. I don't care. Right. Don't email me because I lose it. It's so some people I know operate straight off their calendar in their phone. No, God no. So everything is almost trial and error to what works. What works for you. Is it a hybrid of both? Like yourself, is it all pen and paper? And there isn't too many pen and paper people anymore because obviously technology is going that way. And yes, I usually have my little thing with me, everywhere I go. It's a little more of a hassle, but I haven't been able to make that switch over yet to the digital side. I'm still on the Oregon Trail game, floppy disk. So maybe give me another 10, 15 years, it might be flipped over. But it was, bulletin boards, there's paper everywhere. I'm always writing to be where to be because, my schedules were always printed out. We're, all right, we're going on a road trip. Here's an itinerary. Everything's written out where to be, what time the plane lives, what time this is. So I've had to carry that, but pen and paper for me is my is definitely my lifeline. I can keep tasks in my head all day long, but as long as I have a schedule, which I think almost calms the blender down,
Yeah.
that I could pick other things out. If I didn't have that schedule written down, then that's when I'm like, all right, that's when my blender's really going, okay, now what do I have this? I don't, I got to be here. Am I supposed to be here? What, and that's when, everything turns into a shit show. And I got to find that calendar wherever it is. And that's how it stops me. And then I can focus on, tasks from there.
Right. No, and I love that you just kind of laid that out, because it was also making me think. There was one of my kids' coaches was always like a last minute guy. And I would have like the calendar in the week, but I go off by the week. Like, so if someone's like, what are you doing in 2 weeks on Monday? And I'm like, I haven't put that in my calendar yet.
Sure.
I need to do it week. So like, it's like, okay, I look Sunday, I'm like, okay, I have everything. And then now I have the week kind of planned out, but I would have this coach that would constantly throw things, change things. And I would say to him, I was like, listen, I know you don't care, but I have 2 other kids.
Yeah.
I already had like carpools scheduled, this and that. You can't fucking do that. Like, you have to get more organized, because you're going to literally break me. Yeah. And I'm going to lose it. There was actually a period of time I said to my husband, you have to deal with him, because he is actually throwing me so off, because he is so unorganized. And so, yeah.
There's nothing worse than that. With my teams, when that schedule comes out, for the year, here it is. I usually, I don't change it, because that, screws everything up. Here it is, and your managers, I'm like, you deal with everything. I got nothing. No, I'm out. Don't, no. The simple, when you're coaching a team, you got 10, 12, 15, 20 other families in there. Changing things at the last second, probably not going to work out very well. Maybe the odd time it might, but you want to do that consistently, you might die, because it doesn't work like that when you have younger kids. It's just it just doesn't. Everybody's got an extra kid or 2 or working, or so that's where that schedule for me came into play at a young age, because going to school, it's you find out in September when your schedule is all year long and games, and so I still kind of operate off that, and I'm never changing. It's changed the last second. No.
Yeah, no. And this he's gotten way better, because I literally was like, we're not going to keep continuing this program if this is how it's going to go, because it literally throws me, and I will find something else. And he's like, nope, I'm going to get better too. We grew with the program. I actually am glad that we did, because it is a great program, but it was a shit show, and it really did. Like, I can't believe how much, again, like the non-fun side of me was like, I'm going to rip this guy's face off. Like 2 seconds. Like it's not. So
I don't think, being a mom, it doesn't matter if you have it or not. If you have more than one kid and you've got carpools, so I don't think it doesn't matter if you have ADHD or not. It's just like, all right, this is set up. I can't flip 62 things at once. It doesn't work that way.
No. Totally. But that's, again, right. It as the organization. And this is where then it also comes back to the routines, and routines are really important in everyone's life. And there's times in my life where I'm like, I don't want routine. I love not having a routine for a little period of time, but then I find myself spinning. So like, if we think of a child and the summer or these things, it is fine. And you have to know your kid, right? Some kids need it constantly. Others might need that downtime where it's like, okay, I can be off routine for a little bit, but then you have to get them back on it. Like I always am like, I love the summer because no routine. And then probably a month in, I start twitching and I'm like, I guess I need my routine again. Like, cause I'm like off the reservation, right? I go, but I'm all or nothing. So it's like, there's no routine or there's a routine. There's like not a lot of in between.
Yeah, that routine for me was the only thing that kept me alive, kept me, my hockey career. I lived and died by that. And now that with what I'm doing now, I guess that routine is that schedule for me.
Right.
Needing to see that to create a routine around that.
Which is so important.
Yeah, for me, it's it is everything. You're right. Fly by night, I can go here, I can do that, whatever. But that's all based off what my schedule is.
Right. So, and I mean, we talked about this being a professional athlete, but I mean, that's what it was. But then also you also having, learning disabilities, that was so important. And that you realized, okay, this is how I work best. But when it stopped, you didn't completely realize that that's what you kind of were craving, is that routine and being there and doing what you loved. I mean,
again, I was told where to be, when to be, how to be for 40 years. You take that away, and you're deer in headlights. Without you realizing, what that schedule was, and it's going to be the same for athletes. Military. You take that away from us, something that's been embedded in us for 20, 30, 40, or whatever that is. You're like, okay. Now, it ends up being something that you're not even it's part of who you are. So you're not even consciously saying, oh, I need this routine, or, it's just in your DNA, who you are and what makes you operate.
Right. No. And it's bringing it back to, again, now in the education system, right? The routine and having these kids, okay, this kid learns this way. This kid learns this way. A teacher's teaching this way. And it's throwing half the class off, or two, as you said, one or two kids. So what does that look like in the education system for the summer, for kids with dyslexia, for kids with ADHD? What is going to be the thing that's going to keep them grounded?
And, for teachers is obviously, again, dyslexia, 1 in 5 hereditary, ADHD, if you continue to be a teacher, these things aren't going away. They're getting more prevalent. They're getting diagnosed more, So you need to take some time and learn and have some understanding of what they are, because they're not going to go away. So, are you going to continue to fight with a kid? And, I had this happen. A friend in Canada, son's in grade 7, ADHD, and the teacher has zero clue what it means. Now she's made that kid a target. So how many years do you plan on teaching and plan on making kids a target? It's something that needs to be understood. You don't have it, you're never really going to understand it, but you need to figure out, have some understanding, because it's not going away. And if you plan on being a teacher for, 10, 15, 20 years, it's only going to make your days a lot easier too, if you have some understanding.
And again, it brings us back to why we started this podcast, the understanding part. And then, our stories, as we've gotten into in other episodes, but bringing this up, I mean, we've talked about, different things that we've had happen to us when we were in school. And one of the things that really saddens me is when a teacher has checked out, right? They don't want to be there anymore. And, everyone's human. You're going to like some people. You're not going to like some people. That's normal. Right. I mean, that is normal. No, not everyone is everyone's cup of tea. Correct. But when you're a teacher and you're having kids, you need to, you need to make it where it's going to be the best for yourself and the best for the kids. So understanding everyone in a certain way. Again, we know this is not easy. There's some districts, some kids, they have 30 kids in a class, but understanding in even a little more than you understand now is going to make your year better. It's going to make the child's year better, and it's going to make the parents' year better. So when you have no understanding and you target a kid, I mean, we all have had that, right? Everyone listening to this, you've been in a class where the teacher does not like a certain kid. I fortunately was never really on that. I mean, I annoyed teachers, but I was never like the target. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I probably had teachers that would, target a little bit, like, okay, stop, doing this, stop doing that, but not like where I was getting sent to the principal or like, getting yelled at constantly in the class. But we've all been there where that has happened. And it just also brings the whole class, Like everyone's uncomfortable because everyone's on edge because it's like, okay, I don't know if this person is going to then come after me or whatever. And come after me, I'm not making this like it's like a gang fight, but like when you have that energy that is being kind of distributed through the class, the kid is nervous. The kid doesn't know what the kid's doing. And again, no kid is going to school being like, hey, let me see who I can piss off so I can be a target and I can be made feel like shit. There's no one that does that. No. It doesn't matter. Even the kids that maybe have a bad family life and are pissed off because of that, when they're in, kindergarten, first, second grade, they're looking for love. They're looking for acceptance.
Exactly.
So if they're acting out, find out why. Yeah. And again, we understand the education system, especially in the United States right now, is broken. I feel like it's worldwide, but I know that there's countries that do it better than what we're doing. I mean, you were just talking about Canada.
What about Canada? Yeah, terrible.
Right, the education system. I mean, it's a joke.
Well, and to that, I think you and I had this conversation offline. Is if you take a look at the countries that are doing it better, they're very small. Mm-hmm. And you've got to educate before you can change. Everybody wants to talk about how bad the education system is, how bad it is, well, first off, from the top down, they don't understand what we're talking about. They don't know what dyslexia is. They don't know what ADHD is. They don't know what all these things are. So until we can completely educate everybody from top to the bottom, then there's no change is going to be made. Because if you're going to go and change a whole curriculum, in a school district in a state, you're talking about millions of kids, or you're talking about was it 350 million people here? So how many kids? 100 million? I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot that needs to go into that, and there's a lot of misunderstood or not understanding what all this information is. And that's why the podcast is to have these conversations and trying to enlighten more and more people of what it is, dyslexia, dysgraphia, calcula, ADHD, because it is very common, but we can't change things that you don't even understand.
Right, and that takes us then to the name of the podcast, right? Word blindness, dyslexia exposed. Word blindness, when I started researching a little bit about dyslexia and the word dyslexia, word blindness kept coming up. And I was like, what is this? This is very interesting because it is, dyslexia is the words. But then it was what they referred to dyslexia before it was called dyslexia in the 1900s. And we talked about that. So in the 1900s, they were aware of this dyslexia, yeah. But then someone named it dyslexia, which dyslexia people can't spell fucking dyslexia. So I don't know where that came from. That's drives me crazy in itself. So
it's 1900s and we still have no clue what it is. So,
right.
There's a lot of work to be done when it comes to, figure out what these are. People, autism is like 1 in 65. It's not hereditary. That's why we do this. That's why these conversations that we talk openly, trying to educate as many people as we can. Obviously the ultimate goal is have a full understanding by everybody and, change the education system, from top to bottom. But there's a lot of conversations, a lot of education needs to go in, and everybody's got to be willing to, to listen, because every person's different.
And so again, we're throwing it out to those teachers that are doing something different. That you're there, that you're like, you know what? I actually do it. Like my mom, like Mrs. Hume, like these teachers, I can name a couple teachers that my son has had that I'm like, it's like a breath of fresh air when they're like, I get it. I understand how he learns. I know what he needs. And it takes the pressure off us parents that are going through, just wanting to protect our children. I mean, you went through it. All parents want the best for their children, right? And when you are battling, when you're going through it, it almost feels like you're an island by yourself. And when you're constantly in these IEP meetings and they're like, okay, this is what we're doing. And you're like, okay, we're constantly also talking about the weaknesses, and we're not saying, hey, this kid's actually really, really good at this. Let's maybe concentrate on that a little bit and strengthen that even more and support the weaknesses instead of putting all the eggs into the weakness basket and making the kid feel like shit every day. Cause it's like, this is what you suck at. This is what you suck at. This is what you suck at.
Yeah. And I think that the more understanding that we have, then that approach becomes different than what you're saying, because that person who doesn't know what it is, yes, they're going to point all the all the weaknesses because they don't understand what the strengths are. So I think the more education we can do, the more open we are with all this, the more apt we are to get to that that positive side and understanding quicker.
No, totally. And again, not bashing the teachers, but it is like, they're like, well, we just want to get them stronger in this, because if they're stronger in this, then maybe it will, kind of level out a little bit. But that's where the non-understanding, that's where the misunderstood, like when you're dysgraphic, this is what used to make me crazy all the time. It was like all the OT, all of this, all of that. And it was like, okay, let's just try to support it. Or when you're dyslexic and you're auditory. So like you really listen and you can learn. That was my son. He literally could listen and like repeat exactly what it was. And I was like, okay, so when you took a test, really you should be taking the test that way. And I still never got that. I mean, we still fought and fought and fought for that, and those kind of things is when you understand how someone learns and support those weaknesses, because of through education is like, again, this is what the whole thing with this podcast is. We want to educate and have understanding, because when you have that and then you look at the whole child, not just the weaknesses, not just, okay, this is the strength, but the whole child and how they learn, that's when the difference is going to happen.
And I talk about this all the time. Self-esteem. I don't care if you're in grade 1. I don't care if you're in grade 8. You're a senior in high school or a freshman in college. If you're struggling with self-esteem, you can teach them whatever fucking way you want. So, I really have a hard time understanding with teachers. You see the kid is struggling. It doesn't matter how you teach them, what you teach them. They're not going to learn. So why can't we? You see that they're struggling. Try and have some understanding, because you can give them whatever test you want. You can do whatever you want. If they're struggling like I did, 8 hours a day being at school, yeah, guess what? I didn't learn. I didn't pass. So it's. Yes, they learn a certain way, yes, sir. But if they're struggling in life with who they are and we need to get some positive, we need to get some excitement, you need to get some self-esteem back in them before they ever learn, no matter if that's blue fish, red fish, green fish, whatever it is. I just, it's that self-esteem. You can see the kid in the corner, they're struggling. And why turn your back on them?
And again, that self-esteem, the self-esteem is, we talk about it a bunch because that is, and when you're early on in education, again, if you see, okay, the kid's struggling and you find the strengths early. So that's where the neuropsych comes in, right? That's why it's so important to do that whole test, because when you find those strengths and you're able to say, hey, okay, you're good at this, we're going to support you here. The kid's going to see the things that they're good at. And when we talk about this, right? So I was very fortunate that my strengths, my parents and whatever, and we talk about the innate confidence and however that looks, but it is really important, because when you fail, like we failed so many times in school. I mean, I can't even, count how many times I failed in school and how many times I just picked myself back up and did it again. Right. Mm-hmm. Now I know I'm very resilient in things because of that failure. But I can look back and see that, there was times, and I think we talked about this, when I was trying to get into college, I had to take the SATs, and I don't love talking about this because it makes me not feel very great, but I needed to get a certain SAT score because I was getting recruited by a really good Division I school for lacrosse. It was one of the top schools. I could not get my SAT scores up to the grade. To the scores to be able to play in Division I. So there was back in the day, you had to have a certain grade. And I couldn't do it. I probably took it 13 to 50 times. And every single time I was either one question away, it was 10 points, 10 freaking points. Okay. And I remember I go back to my senior year and I could tweak because it was so hard. I just wanted to play. I just wanted to play, and I just wanted to go to the school, and I could not get those SAT scores because I sucked at taking tests. I sucked. I got such anxiety. I mean, I took it unwritten. I mean, I took it, every way. I with the giant headphones, someone reading it to me. And I think the first time is the best I did. I think every other time I did even worse. And now I can see that, you know what? My trajectory took me in a different way. I went Division III. I played 2 sports. I actually became really good in school because then I started studying something I did. I even stopped playing sports because I was like, I found this whole new part of me. Would that have happened if I played at the Division I school? Maybe not. Probably not. So that's again where the failure and the failure and the failure, I can look at the positive now. But I had that self-esteem, even though it got chipped away at times and I built it back up. When you don't have it and a kid doesn't have it from a very young age and they don't ever build it up, they're just going to give up on stuff. Yep. And then that's when bigger problems in life can happen.
Correct. 100%. It's all, again, it's my number one thing. You can look in the corner and you can see, Sammy's, down. Like, it's pretty easy to see, Sophia's playing by herself. It's, it's not rocket science. It's just taking a couple extra minutes to care, and ask a couple questions and, see what's going on. Because kids aren't nice. They're not nice, especially at social media and all that stuff. So, just take that couple seconds because you never know what that might mean to a kid.
So again, teachers, the ones that are doing things different, please reach out to us because we want to highlight you. We want to talk about your experience. We will literally call you out and say, this teacher in, whatever city, town, wherever you are, that you're doing this, because that again is going to educate other listeners. It's going to give other teachers the, you know what, I can do that if this teacher is doing it. So again, email, you can do info@iamjuliethahn.com. This will also be in the show notes. But thank you again for joining another episode of Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. Brent and I are excited to keep sharing these, rate, review. And also you might listen to this episode and say, oh, that's interesting, but share it because you don't know who needs to hear this. You don't know what teacher out there is saying, I want to be better. I want to be a better teacher, but they don't know how. And you also don't know what parent you're going to touch or what kid, might have, they're now in college and they listen to this and they're like, oh my gosh, okay, I need to dive into this more. As Brent said, it starts with the education. It starts with us talking about this, one person at a time. Changing one person's life at a time is what we're, doing with Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.